Hello and welcome. You're watching Beyond World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour. The death toll from a major earthquake in Myanmar has now risen to over 1,644. An estimated 3,000 people have sustained some grievous injuries. This as the rescuers are racing against time to try and save the survivors. The world rushes in to aid Myanmar that is reeling under destruction. India, China and Russia dispatched teams of rescuers and relief supplies for the survivors. Ahead of the Eid festival celebrations marking the end of the fasting month of Ramzan, Afghanistan's Taliban government has released nearly about 2,500 prisoners. And tens of thousands of supporters of South Korea's impeached president Yoon Suk-yeol rally in Seoul. This, the country's constitutional court weighs in on whether to dismiss him. Now, India and the US conclude trade talks in New Delhi. Discussions were a follow-up to the India-US decision in February to have a bilateral trade agreement to expand the bilateral trade to about $500 billion by the year 2030. The West African nation Guinea pardons the former dictator Moussa Dadis Camara, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison over a 2009 massacre for health reasons. And heavy rain triggers flooding in Predor town of western Bosnia. The videos of houses getting submerged by the floodwaters go viral. And partial solar eclipse in the northern hemisphere enthralls the sky gazers. From London to Norway, the moon was seen appearing to take bites out of the sun in Europe, Western Africa, Eastern North America and Northern Asia.
Praise to Yahweh, Shem HaShabbat, Shem HaChakodash, to honor the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings and hopefully elect of the tabernacles of David scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, wherever you may be. Wherever you may be, Shalom, Yahshua, Shalom. All right, this is going to be super brief. All right, real quick. Real quick, speaking on the current event here. Seems to be one of the most major things because you also got war going on. What I'm referring to is this event that occurred in Myanmar, all right? This earthquake here, and it's very interesting because we just had a Passover, right? And on the Passover, right, because we had the Saturday come in, the Passover roll in, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, all right, and amongst that Passover night you had what? The blood moon, right? So now what you have here is because I believe, if I'm correct, the date in Myanmar right now is probably the 30th. This supposedly occurred from like 28th, I believe, moving to the 29th. But then also you had a partial solar eclipse that was supposed to be 29th, which is, I don't know if it should be today. But yeah, you had these events, all right, that seem to have worked in conjunction with one another, the earthquake and then this partial solar eclipse. Now, I'm not saying this is a major or this is the exact thing. It's just something I was thinking about. So I decided to grab a couple scriptures. So it says, "Thus said the Lord Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them." All right, and so we understand what these things are when they happen, right? These are signs from heavens. Not saying that exactly the partial solar eclipse was in line with the earthquake, but I just find it very interesting how they kind of transition, back to back, all right, around the same time. And I also want to get one more here, which is going down to Zephaniah chapter 3, all right, verse 5. It says, "The just Lord Yahweh is in the midst thereof. He will not do iniquity. Every morning doth he bring his judgment to light. He faileth not, but the unjust knoweth no shame." All right. And so we're gonna get more events happen like this. This is one isolated event, but imagine, when the times of Jacob's trouble are full bloom, things are just going nuts. All right, it's going to be 100 times worse than this. Right, we're spiritually preparing. This is something small, quick. I just want to hit with a couple scriptures though. So we leave it at that.
The sky gazers around the world witnessed a spectacular celestial event today, the year's first partial solar eclipse. Unlike a total solar eclipse, today's event left part of the sun visible, creating a stunning crescent shape in the sky. In London, for nearly 40% of the sun was covered at its peak, creating a striking sight in a very clear sky. In Greenland's capital Nuuk, the moon veiled much of the sun, darkening the sky almost completely. Another rare phenomenon is the double sunrise that may also be visible in some regions, as the partial eclipse creates the illusion of the sun rising twice. NASA confirmed that no location experienced a total solar eclipse this time round, but that wasn't the only astronomical spectacle today. At Chile's Paranal Observatory, a rare planetary alignment was captured. 7 planets that are visible in a small patch of sky. The Chilean astronomers say this occurs once every 400 years. And if you've missed it this time round, you can catch it again 400 years later. So as the planets appear to form a straight line, though they remain very far apart in space. Now, for the astrologically inclined, the celestial movements have yet another special significance. Saturn is transiting from the zodiacal sign to Aquarius into the sign of Pisces. Now, known as an extremely slow-moving, steady energy planet, the transit of Saturn for some heralds destruction, especially in the wake of massive earthquakes in many countries, including in Myanmar and Thailand. However, this is not said to hold true for all, as the period is associated with long-term accomplishments linked to career, creativity, and personal and spiritual growth. Now, in general, eclipses are shrouded in belief and mythology that vary across cultures. In the Hindu mythology, a beheaded demon, Rahu, swallows the sun and the moon, causing eclipses. In the Vietnamese folklore, a giant frog swallows the sun. In the Chinese mythology, a dragon eats the sun, causing the eclipse. Similarly, the Nordic and the Korean myths suggest that wolves and dogs chase and swallow the sun and the moon. And the ancient Greeks and the Incas interpreted eclipses as a sign that the gods were angry with humans and that the sun would abandon Earth. Now, some cultures also believe that eclipses could cause issues during pregnancy or birth defects, and that food should not either be cooked or eaten during an eclipse. However, the U.S. Space Agency NASA states that the radiation emitted from the sun towards Earth, called neutrinos, are actually pretty harmless. It also categorically states that eclipses do not affect pregnant women in any way. It is added that eclipses have no link to earthquakes or wars caused by human beings or even making water to move in the wrong direction.
A violent earthquake and aftershocks have devastated the country of Myanmar. This is one of the strongest quakes to hit the Southeast Asian country in decades. Thailand is also feeling the extent of the 7.7 magnitude quake, with buildings collapsing and trapping a lot of people underneath the rubble. Fox's Stephanie Bennett has more from London as the search for missing people continues.
Foreign aid is pouring in after a violent earthquake shook Burma on Friday. The 7.7 magnitude quake triggered the collapse of buildings, bringing the death toll to at least 1,600 people, according to the country's ruling military.
Buildings have been reduced to rubble in just seconds. Teams are telling us that they are even hearing screams from under the rubble, and the screams have been quietened after a bit.
India, China, and Russia are among those sending relief teams into Burma.
A total of about 50 tons of relief material is being transported to Yangon. This includes clothing bricks.
Despite cuts to foreign aid, President Donald Trump said that the U.S. will also provide some assistance. Meanwhile, the United Nations has set aside $5 million for relief efforts. It says extensive infrastructure damage will complicate humanitarian response.
The earthquake will compound an already dire humanitarian situation in Myanmar, where nearly 20 million people need assistance across the country.
The quake also rattling buildings in neighboring Thailand, where families in Bangkok anxiously wait to hear for news about their missing loved ones.
I am praying my husband wasn't working at this site. He usually worked at 2 sites. I've told our kids I am here to bring Daddy home.
According to the U.S. Geological Survey's predictive modeling, Burma's death toll could surpass more than 10,000 people. In London,
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Jean-Claude Gakoso, the Foreign Minister of the Republic of Congo, in Beijing on Friday to strengthen cooperation between China and Africa. Wang stressed the importance of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation as a key platform for mutual development. He also pledged to implement the agreements made at last year's Beijing summit. Gakoso expressed the Republic of Congo's strong support for its role as co-chair of FOCAC. He highlighted the country's commitment to advancing FOCAC initiatives, including the China-Africa Economic Trade Expo, to deepen collaboration and bring more tangible benefits to both regions.
Trump signed an order this week in his war against woke. His latest executive order demands the removal of all, quote, divisive, improper, and anti-American ideology from famous institutions. First, he took over the Kennedy Center, as you remember. Now Donald Trump wants to control the Smithsonian, the African American Museum, national parks, and the National Zoo. The executive order says it is for restoring truth and sanity to American history. But does this really just translate into whitewashing American history? We are going to discuss. First, to you, Torrey.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about American greatness, and clearly he means white greatness. And we are erasing Black history. I mean, I didn't realize that the Smithsonian, the Black History Museum, was part, I mean, like, obviously, but I didn't read that yet, and it almost makes me want to cry, because that is such an incredibly important space. I took my children and my wife there, like, as soon as it opened, and, like, I studied AF-AM in college, and I learned a lot going through that museum, and it's deeply emotional and moving. And to say, we don't want to talk about the history of racism, that is part of American greatness. It's part of America's evil, but the way we have moved from enslavement to segregation to wherever we are now, or wherever we were a few years ago, is part of America's greatness, and it's part of America's real story. And to say we're going to erase this and just focus on what white people have done, that's not what America is.
Vaccine company Pfizer allegedly withheld positive news about its COVID vaccine until after 2020's presidential election was decided, the Wall Street Journal reports. British drug maker GSK reportedly tipped off federal prosecutors in Manhattan last November, claiming Pfizer withheld announcing the success of its COVID vaccine just days after President Trump lost the 2020 election to President Biden, and now prosecutors are looking into the tip. A former Pfizer scientist named Phil Dormitzer, who now works for GSK, allegedly told his GSK colleagues the information, which he disputes ever doing. President Trump has long claimed that Pfizer delayed its COVID vaccine results to impact his chances at re-election when critics claimed he mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic.
Pfizer and others even decided to not assess the results of their vaccine. In other words, not come out with a vaccine until just after the election. That's because of what I did with favored nations and these other elements, instead of their original plan to assess the data in October. So they were going to come out in October, but they decided to delay it because of what I'm doing, which is fine with me because, frankly, this is just a very big thing.
Pfizer's CEO, Albert Bourla, told USA Today back in November 2020 that the COVID vaccine data came in 2 to 3 days after Election Day. The election took place on November 3rd, and Bourla claims the company received the data on the 5th or the 6th. Biden was declared president on November 7th. Bourla told USA Today the Independent Monitoring Committee overseeing the results received them on November 8th. Pfizer then released them the following day, November 9th. Dormitzer's attorney has apparently spoken to prosecutors, according to the Journal, citing people familiar with the matter. Dormitzer released a statement saying, "My Pfizer colleagues and I did everything we could to get the FDA's emergency use authorization at the very first possible moment. Any other interpretation of my comments about the pace of the vaccine's development would be incorrect." Prosecutors have not interviewed any Pfizer officials. It's unclear what, if any, charges could be filed.
Most American renters don't even dream that owning a home is in their future, no matter how much they want it. Americans currently renting today only give themselves a 34% chance of ever owning a home, whereas for the better part of the past decade, that chance was above 50%. That's according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's 2025 housing survey and is the lowest on record. Just because it seems more impossible to obtain the housing dream doesn't mean they don't want it. According to the New York Fed, 71.5% of renters prefer or strongly prefer owning their own home. That's actually up 3 percentage points from 10 years ago. So what's keeping prospective first-time home buyers in the dumps? The most obvious factor is the price. The median sales price for new homes in the U.S. was $415,000 in February 2025. That's up 45% from $287,000 in February 2015. If we're looking for silver linings, houses are slightly cheaper today than in 2022. But here to crush that silver lining is the interest rate on the average mortgage. In 2020 and 2021, you could get a 30-year fixed mortgage locked in between 2.5% and 3.5%. Today, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is around 6.7%. Your next silver lining is that it could always be worse. In the early 80s, people were paying 18% on a new mortgage. A not so fun fact is that for every 1 percentage point the mortgage rate increases, you lose 10% in buying power. That means the home you can afford is 10% less expensive. The housing crunch is also creating issues. Now, there are more homes available in February 2025 than we've seen in the last 4 years, according to Realtor.com. But the amount of homes on the market is still well below levels seen from 2017 to 2020. A year ago, a study found that renting was officially cheaper than buying in all 50 states. But that doesn't mean renting is without its financial burden. According to the New York Fed survey, renters expect rates to increase an average of 11% over the next 12 months. That's the highest average expectation in more than a decade, except for 2022, when inflation was nearing its peak. For Straight Air News.
The USS Nimitz aircraft carrier is headed for the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility. It's likely the last deployment for the U.S. Navy's oldest and longest-serving aircraft carrier. The Nimitz began its final deployment on March 21st when it left its home port at Naval Base Kitsap in Washington State. From there, it was on to San Diego to pick up Carrier Air Wing 17 and meet up with its escorts. Now the Nimitz and its strike group are steaming for the Western Pacific. The 1,092-foot-long, 100,000-ton carrier was commissioned in 1975. The first in the Nimitz class of nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, the ship was named after World War II Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, who led the U.S. Navy's island-hopping campaign through the Pacific against the Japanese. In a release about the deployment, the U.S. Navy says for 50 years, the USS Nimitz was proof positive of America's commitment to maintaining a forward presence around the world while ensuring maritime security, deterring aggression, and protecting the American way of life. After 5 decades of service, you can imagine the Nimitz and its crews saw a lot. It served in oceans all over the world, took part in dozens of military operations, and was part of numerous historical events. The Nimitz supported Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, among others, and it was aboard the Nimitz's flat top that the U.S. Navy's F-35C 5th-generation stealth fighter first qualified for carrier operations. The The Nimitz and its strike group will fill the gap left behind by the USS Carl Vinson. The Vinson and its strike group were ordered to the Middle East by SecDef Pete Hegseth to take part in operations against the Houthis and potentially Iran. While the Nimitz is scheduled to be decommissioned in 2026, the carrier did recently undergo some maintenance and received regular upgrades over its service life. So there are some lobbying to keep the aircraft carrier in service a little longer. If that happens, the U.S. Navy would be operating 12 carriers at once. Make no mistake, that's a lot of high-priced warships to take care of. But considering the state of the world, supporters say having another carrier in operation wouldn't be such a bad thing.
ta sa mong bau ma ba ma le tông mình u mà nên nó mong cá đi ó mà chiếu
making a video because this is weird to me. It looks strange. The texture of the flowers.
Yeah, that's cool.
Porque ahí arriba está muy peligroso estar nada más ahí arriba. No sé si hay alguien más ahí por negro.
¿Qué está haciendo? ¿Se quiere?
Está muy hondo, mi tío. Ahorita intentó cruzar y no puede.
Están inundados los carros.
Heather!
Friday's powerful earthquake in Southeast Asia. This morning, Myanmar's military government says more than 1,000 people were killed when the magnitude 7.7 quake struck around midday. Malaysia, China, and Russia are sending rescue teams. President Trump has pledged to help with the response. And in Bangkok, at least 6 people were killed and dozens more missing when the quake flattened a high-rise building under construction. For the very latest, let's get to CBS News foreign correspondent Anna Coren.